Powered by Riverside FM.
Summer is synonymous with sport, and as the summer grows to a close, we can look back on a number of significant sporting events. These events have showcased great skill and athleticism. They've given us some shows of dominance, as well as some unexpected results. It's a combination of all of these things that makes sport exciting. But some sports are more popular than others, and in this podcast, we'll be having a brief look at why. The genesis for this question came from my observation about the volume of people who watch tennis in person. I watch a fair amount of televised tennis, and outside of the Grand Slams, and even in some of the earlier rounds of the Grand Slams or on the smaller outside courts, there are often plenty of empty seats. This is surprising because each of those tennis events only occurs annually, and indeed most cities only host world-class tennis once a year. Further, the total capacity of those venues is typically relatively small for a sporting event, and therefore you would think easy to fill. For example, the capacity of the centre court at Wimbledon is roughly 15,000 people. That's an audience size which is regularly achieved by most second or third tier football clubs on a weekly basis. And while centre court is indeed often a sellout, in fact getting tickets for centre court is extremely difficult, they're not always taken up by those spectators, who may choose to watch other matches instead, or indeed not turn up. Now don't get me wrong, there are plenty of people who watch tennis, it's just that the total volume is smaller than for some of the most popular sports. Before I move on, I'm going to share one further fun fact. What do you think is the sporting event with the most in-person viewers? It's the Tour de France, with some estimating that around 10 million people will have watched this year's event in person. It's a bit surprising because cycling is not a great spectator sport. Each stage typically takes hours, with not that much happening from the spectator's perspective. And if you do go to watch in person, you'll only see a fraction of that whole event, probably only about 10 seconds, as the peloton whizzes past you at great speed. I therefore consider that it's the most watched event in person to be something of a quirk. It's only achieved because the event takes place over 3 weeks rather than, say, a 90-minute football match. It travels around large chunks of a whole country, so many people have an opportunity to view it, and crucially, it's free to view. So let's put the Tour de France to one side. What other factors play a role in how exciting something is and how popular it is to be viewed in person? The first point is one of the most subjective. That's how much action and variation might take place in a particular sport. Because people's view on the action is subjective, perhaps the way to consider it is to look at the scoring system. Let's compare football and tennis. Football is a fluid game with lots happening, but there is relatively limited scoring, which makes goals when they occur that bit more exciting. Tennis, however, is a point-for-point game, so by definition, every time a point is played, something happens in terms of an immediate impact on the score. But how exciting relatively each of those types of action and scoring is subjective, and in fact most sports fans will enjoy different types of sports. Next, let's consider duration. In the case of endurance sports, even individual stages typically take multiple hours. At this point, I think people's interest tends to decline. At the other extreme, some sports events are incredibly short. For example, this summer's heavyweight boxing match between Usyk and Dubois lasted only 5 rounds, approximately 15 minutes. I'm not a boxing fan, but I think many found the match to be exciting, and the short duration did not detract from that excitement. There must be a limit to this, though. If a bout only lasts 1 or 2 rounds, I'm sure the fans will be disappointed, even if they were happy with the result. Next, Let's look at quality. Generally speaking, fans enjoy high-quality performances. Those where the participants or teams are producing sport which is at the highest level and demonstrating the best of human skill and ability. This is why in league structures, typically the Premier Division is more popular than the lower leagues. But quality doesn't always lead to excitement. In this year's Women's European Football Championship, the match between England and Sweden was a standout. In fact, it came down to a deciding penalty shootout, but one which was devoid of quality. Of the 14 penalties taken, only 5 were scored, 6 were saved, and 3 were missed completely. Nevertheless, this seeming lack of quality didn't make the event any less gripping. Indeed, in some ways, it made the match even more compelling as a viewer. Further, in some instances, high quality may not lead to the most entertaining match, particularly in events which are directly contestable between two participants, where the high quality from one competitor may overwhelm the other. For example, in this year's Wimbledon ladies singles final, the match was won by Iga Swiatek, defeating her opponent Amanda Anisimova 6-love, 6-love in a whitewash which lasted only 57 minutes. While Swiatek demonstrated very high-quality tennis, I think most spectators would agree that the one-sided nature of the final detracted from its overall entertainment value. Let's now move to the factor of fandom, because in some other contexts, where sports stars have a large loyal following, if they exhibit significant dominance, it doesn't detract from the overall level of entertainment. For example, think of the Tiger Woods era in golf, where his dominant victories were not seen to make the sport any less entertaining, but were widely celebrated. In that context, individual sports are quite different to team sports. With individual sports, people may grow an affinity to those personalities that they admire, or perhaps they admire them for another reason, such as a shared nationality. With team sports, fandom tends to be more enduring and more sticky, in that people will typically follow one team, traditionally their local team. This consistency allows a degree of tribalism and identity to develop, even when the club and its players change over time. A further relevant factor that affects attendance in person at specific events is the scheduling of matches. With something like football, you know long in advance which matches will be occurring when. With tennis, the order of play at tournaments and the uncertainty of the tournament format, which means that players get knocked out as the tournament progresses, often means you cannot predict significantly in advance who will be playing or when. This might be relevant if you were considering booking tickets to see your favourite star. But ultimately, perhaps what makes sports popular is their accessibility. And on this, football wins hands, or should I say feet, down. Football just requires a ball, and key parts of a match, or the skills required, can be improvised in a way that other sports cannot easily replicate. Most other sports require some form of equipment or specialist court. I think it's this relatability that drives football's enduring worldwide